The rules of hospitality. Jesus, of course, was a friend of sinners. Nobody was more hospitable to people that didn't deserve it than Jesus was, which, by the way, the concept of hospitality in Eastern culture is giving kindness and provision to people that you don't know necessarily or don't deserve it. We tend to think of hospitality as coming to one another's house, we're friends, and so we're hospitable to one another. In the Eastern culture, the language of the Bible, that isn't exactly how it was. Hospitality was primarily demonstrated to the strangers, to the people they didn't know, to the people that didn't deserve, and nobody showed that better than Jesus. And when people came to him and received, what was the hospitality that he gave them? He fed them, he healed them, he set them free from demonic oppression and problems. Nobody did more to show hospitality than he did. Now, he said, Jesus taught, that if you just love those that love you, what thanks have you? Because even the sinners, he said, do the same. So hospitality to us, and what I kind of was getting around to last week, there's this thing called chemistry that we either enjoy or don't enjoy amongst different groups. But the more mature you are and the more dedicated to serving others, the more you tend to be able to relate to people that are unlike you. That's a sign of maturity. Immaturity is when we're just hanging out with people that are like us, that we like to be around because they're like us. We get along. The real demonstration of God is to love people that don't deserve it, not those that are easy to love. When Jesus sent out his 70 or 72 disciples, depending on which translation you're reading in Luke 10, he gave them very specific and yet very simple instructions, because these guys had basically the understanding and the intellect and the education of a complete volume of the New York Times one-day edition. When you consider how primitive the world was that Jesus was speaking to, and the primitive understanding of those disciples, we would be blown away to know how simple they really were. So don't be surprised that the instructions are also simple. Again, my buddy Juan Carlos calls them estupids. Somehow he puts a Spanish accent on it, and they're not just stupid, they're estupids. So this is what Jesus tells the estupids. He first of all tells them that they're to go. And so I've reduced this down to words that all start with S. The first word is search. He said, now go like lambs among wolves. Now, anybody here think that sounds like a pleasant pastoral scene? I came from literally a family of sheep herding, real sheep. And I don't know why God decided to curse me with the obstinate variety to pastor. But nonetheless, I didn't like the fully woolly ones. That wasn't good for me. But sheep and wolves generally don't mix good in the pasture. Just so you know. The lambs get eaten. Don't even take a wolf. A coyote will eat a lamb. But that was Jesus' introduction. I'm sending you out, and this is dangerous. This is not going to be the easiest thing you ever did. Now again, because of the nature of our culture, we stumble at the outset. We're going, what do you mean this is hard? I'm looking for easy. I'm looking for, doable without a whole lot of, I don't want to lose anything, and I certainly don't want to get killed doing it. But that's the language that Jesus gave. So, in our context, it's virtually incomparable and inconceivable to understand, both culturally, physically, that we're the ones that are blessed now. When Jesus sent these guys out and said to search, go and meet your neighbor, and then to bless your neighbor, we're all sitting in the lap of luxury. Now, how many of you have traveled to third world countries? Some of you have been to Haiti, some have been to Latin America. Anybody been to Asia, to the worst parts of Asia, to India or Pakistan? How blessed do those people look compared to America, as far as the obvious outward stuff? I mean, spiritually, some of those people are very rich. In China, I think the church is probably the healthiest of any place in the world. But you wouldn't know that, you don't see it. We are people that have too much. And what did I say last week? The great enemy against community is affluence and the love of this world. It just saps us. Again, now, we're facing something that's dangerous. Jesus said it was going to be difficult. He said it's going to be dangerous. And on top of that, we live in a culture that just immediately disciples us to think differently than the Bible, which is one of sacrifice and one of dedication and sometimes severity and discipline. We don't get that from the news or the fun shows we watch or the places that we hang out. That's not what they're teaching us. When I go to the mall, the first thing up there isn't sacrifice. You know, it isn't discipline. It's what? You need this. And it's easy to agree with that. That's how good they disciple us. So, we are exceptional. We are blessed already beyond belief. But the search continues for those that still don't have a relationship with Jesus, whether they are rich or poor, whether we are rich or poor. It doesn't stop the search. Now, the search for our neighbor is literally to meet and get to know them. And I know this to be true, that people will drive 30 minutes, 40 minutes, it's up to 60 minutes to attend a church where they claim they're having these great experiences with God, and these are the same people that have never walked across their driveway to meet their neighbor. I'm sorry, that's just impractical and improbable. If we don't at least know the people around us, if we don't at least search in our immediate proximity, we fool ourselves, we kid ourselves that we are driving to have this wonderful church experience that's way down the road from where we live. And yet commuter churches are huge. I've been involved in now, many of them. Tried to help them, try to consult for them, but I have to be honest, if they're not penetrating their neighborhood, it's a little bit hypocritical to me of what we're doing here. So, your neighbor doesn't always have to be the person right next door. I mean, we came from the country. Sometimes our neighbors were a mile away. It was tough. That's why Jesus, by the way, said to go and preach to all the creatures, to every creature, because he knew some of us lived in the rural areas and there weren't no people. No, you didn't get that at all. And you know what? They never respond. Those cows never give you a reaction. They never bend their knees and submit to Jesus, ever. But your neighbor can be anybody within close proximity to you. They can be your co-worker. They can be, just people where you do business and where. So it isn't always necessarily immediately. I just think God has done us an amazing favor by organizing cities into neighborhoods, because in neighborhoods we can be more effective if we choose. It took me a long time to appreciate that, because again, coming from the country, especially coming from Montana, which, we have a grave suspicion of high, densely populated areas. We think that's where all the weirdos hang out, and we don't want anything to do with that. So, in reality, most of the weirdos are my relatives that live out in the country, but they don't know that. So it's okay, because they never get together.
Sheep, right?
Yeah, they never get together, so it's all right.
Picture here.
But look at God. What started in a garden ends in a garden where? In a city. The New Jerusalem is where this all winds up, and it winds up in a garden where a river comes out. God is into cities. That's a fact. God ordained cities.
Heaven's a city.
And we need to learn to take advantage of what God has already provided. And we don't do that by just ignoring the people that live right next door to us. So, we get to know people when we get to know their names, right? And we get permission to connect with them. Listen, if somebody doesn't want to connect with you, they generally make it known. And Jesus said when that happens, just to keep moving. In Luke 10, he didn't say, well, you're going to spend the rest of your life on that one that doesn't want anything to do with you anyway. He goes, no, go to those. And when you meet them and you greet them, bless their house, which we'll get into in a minute. And, he didn't expect us to be fruitless. He expected this to work. And that's probably the greatest reason people don't want to know their neighbor. They've had a bad experience, or they don't want to have a bad experience by getting to know them and then have no reaction or no response. Especially if you're preaching Jesus to them eventually. There's nothing worse than trying to give somebody Jesus and they don't want it. I preferred to do this, and especially in my early years, with somebody in the car, because I never had anybody jump out at 70 miles an hour. And in fact, I said I always want to put a license plate frame on the Viper that said there are no atheists at 165 miles an hour, especially in a Viper, because that thing is very erratic at 165 miles an hour. But it didn't work. We never converted anybody then either. Here's when you know that you're giving your neighbor genuine hospitality, when you are more concerned about their needs and well-being than your own. That's the definition of Jesus' hospitality. He was not concerned about himself. He made himself a servant. He was concerned about everybody else more than himself. And that's why it's dangerous. That's why it's difficult. That's why it's hard. That's why lots of people would rather not do it and just, dumb it down to be a typical American expression of faith, which ain't the worst thing in the world. We're going to get to heaven on it, but it may not change the world. And it certainly may not change an entire community the way that it has the potential. A believer or a community of believers who are not interested in connecting and showing hospitality to those outside their immediate huddle, which we call huddle and cuddle, are already in violation of seeking first the kingdom. And remember last week, that was the ultimate. The ultimate standard is seek first the kingdom of God. Then all the other stuff of life will come. It will be added. It will materialize, sometimes virtually from nowhere. But it's difficult to do that, isn't it? Because that means in seeking first the kingdom, we also have to seek our neighbors. And it's easier to pretend to seek the kingdom and leave our neighbors alone. Okay. Luke 16, 9-14. And by the way, Jesus didn't wait for us to become good at this or to become believers before he gave his life. The Bible says clearly, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While our neighbors are yet not knowing the gospel, is the time we should be the most hospitable and the most aware of. Not wait until they do something for us or that encourages us. Luke 16, 9-14, here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then, when your earthly possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. I've lived long enough now to know that's an absolute fact. But if you are dishonest in little things, you will be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you are untrustworthy with worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? Somebody tell me, what are the true riches of heaven?
Souls.
Yeah.
Yeah. People. It isn't the stuff. God can make the stuff from nothing. Listen, you get to heaven, the pavement is gold. It's the least of the things. It's used for pavement. So God don't care about the stuff. He cares about the people. So if we don't even manage our worldly wealth well, why would God trust us with the souls of people? That's kind of a real in-our-face America type of concept here. It's a little disturbing, actually. And if you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. The Pharisees who dearly loved their money heard all this and scoffed at it. And again, because of the level of sacrifice that sometimes is required to live in authentic community, really helping one another, I think it's easy to just scoff and say, sorry about your need, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to go out of my way to help somebody else, especially when it comes to money. And money becomes an issue, I promise. Because there will always be those. Jesus promised what? There would always be with us.
The poor.
Yeah. Isn't that good news? They're always going to be there. You're never going to run out of work. That's job security, people. How rare is it to find job security in this day and age? Look at Jesus went out of his way to make sure we knew that we were going to be secure in our jobs. Okay, so obviously we need to search for our neighbors, and we need to have the kind of groups that understand that hospitality is all about searching. It's all about giving to people that don't deserve. It's all about trying to serve those that don't have anything coming to them. And sometimes those are the hard people for us, right? I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I'm one of those guys that likes the huddle and cuddle type of deal. I know these people. I'm comfortable here. I especially. Listen, I sit at the same table, in the same chair, in the same coffee shop every day because I don't like things I'm not familiar with. I've got OCD so bad, it's frightening. But, for the gospel's sake, I don't get the luxury of claiming some out. I have to get over that. That's part of growing up. Sometimes you're never fully comfortable. So what? It isn't about your comfort.